to date, and then a week-by-week estimate as well. Thank you for pressing that, Senator Manchin. And Senator Ayotte is next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Admiral and General, for your service to our country. And again, pass on to our gratitude to the troops that serve underneath you for the important work and the sacrifices that they're making for us. I know that you've described, Admiral, somewhat the mission in Libya. How do we define success in Libya?
I think the mission that I am given and under which I am operating at the moment, the military mission, has some clear metrics associated with it. Let's take the arms embargo, for example. It would be zero penetration of Libya with arms coming to resupply Colonel Gaddafi, for example. In terms of protecting the population, I think our metric would be, is the population safe? Are the civilians under attack? So what we would want to, over time, establish is a situation which we would call in NATO context a safe and secure environment for the population. In terms of the no-fly zone, the metric's obvious. It's no flying by any of the military aircraft or any other aircraft without authorization from NATO. In terms of the humanitarian mission we've been assigned, it's numbers of refugees, are they receiving the care, and so on. So I think that's the military mission we've been given, and we have some reasonable metrics that will apply as we go forward to make sure that we meet those for policymakers.
I certainly understand and appreciate those metrics. And I guess my question is getting at, overall, what's our objective? How do we measure success in Libya? Meaning, if we've got Gaddafi in power and he decides to wait us out, one of the concerns I have is what's our strategy if that's the outcome?
I think that if you look at what's happening today, again, in London, where 40 nations are coming together to discuss this, I think virtually every nation's leader has spoken to the desirability of the departure of Colonel Gaddafi. So how the international community arrives at that, I believe, will be a combination of the kind of work that's being done in a military context by the and under the auspices of the UN Security Council resolution and NATO, coupled with the economic sanctions, the financial control of assets of Libyan goods that are outside, the travel restrictions. By putting that cumulative pressure on the regime in Libya, I think you have the best chance of achieving what the heads of state have indicated they desire.
And don't you think it'll be also difficult without some type of military involvement to get a man like Gaddafi to go?
I think it's hard to say. When you look historically at different leaders, sometimes they stay and they fight and they die, and sometimes they crack and they give up and they leave the country. There's a wide spectrum of what could happen going forward. I think it is clear that the international community, as indicated by the statements of the leaders of so many different countries, have indicated that it's time for Colonel Gaddafi to leave.
I'd like to follow up on a question that Senator Inhofe asked you about, and that's the relationship, or whatever information we may have, the relationship between al-Qaeda and the rebels in Libya. There was open source reporting earlier this week that al-Qaeda affiliates in North Africa may have stolen surface-to-air missiles from an arsenal in Libya recently. Can you tell us about that incident, and also what does that say, if anything, about the relationship between the rebels and al-Qaeda affiliates?
I think I'd like to take that question for the record and come back to you so I could give it the full benefit of a classified response, and I think that would probably be the appropriate way to tackle that one.
Thank you. I appreciate that, and appreciate that some of that information might need to be classified, but I think it's a very important question for us to understand in this committee. I'd also like to ask you about overall with your command of the command of the European forces. To be a member of NATO, we've asked each member of NATO to commit at least 2% of their GDP toward military spending.
Right.
Yet not all members of NATO are committing 2% of their GDP to military spending. And in fact, what we're seeing is even our strongest allies, for example, the United Kingdom and France, are having dealing with the same budget pressures that we're dealing here with in the United States. How do you believe that that's going to impact NATO? And also, given the fact that we're relying substantially on NATO for our involvement in Libya right now, with people withdrawing from their commitment in terms of percentage that they're willing to spend on military spending, how do you think that that will impact our readiness, A, going forward, and B, in particular, this conflict in Libya?
Let me kind of give you the good news and the bad news. The good news about NATO is that it's a resource-rich alliance. The GDP of NATO is about $32 trillion. It's about twice the GDP of the United States, and the GDP of NATO is about half that of the world's GDP. So the good news is there are resources there to meet these commitments, in my belief. The bad news is, Senator, what you just pointed out, that our allies in many cases are not committing even the minimum 2%. And I find that, I am concerned about that as I look at the future of the alliance, where some members are meeting that commitment and others are failing to do so. And I think it is incumbent upon particularly nations like ours that are very much meeting the commitment and our leaders to continue to make this point. And I thank you for asking me about it. It's something I talk to all of the uniformed military members about constantly, and it is very concerning. In terms of will it get better, I think we all hope that as we emerge from this series of global economic concerns, that there will be a rise in the economy and there will be more breathing space. But in the immediate future, I agree with you. I think it's extremely concerning, and we should continue to talk and to encourage and to pressure our allies to meet those kind of spending commitments.
Well, I certainly share your concerns, particularly given the conflicts that we are leading throughout the world, that commitment has to be the commitment that we're making. So I certainly will be an advocate for that with our allies. I see that my time is up. I just wanted to also reiterate to both of you, I think it's very important to follow up on the Chairman's comments and Senator Manchin's comments that this committee get very good information on the cost of the conflict in Libya and regular updates, given the fiscal challenges that we're facing right now in this country. And I think also particularly none of us wants to see this diminish our efforts in Afghanistan. So I appreciate both of your service, distinguished service to our country, and thank you very much for answering my questions today.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Senator Ayotte. Senator Blumenthal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and